We will continue to bring you all updates after the attack on Kashmir. We now move over to Europe, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has called for an immediate, full and unconditional ceasefire, just hours after a Russian drone attack on a bus killed 9 and as top aide met in Kiev's allies in London. Zelensky called it a brutal attack and absolutely a deliberate war crime. He also repeated his call for a partial halt on some missile and drone attacks. So far, 49 people have been wounded in the attack on the southern town of Marganets. On the other hand, explosions have rocked a Russian military depot near Moscow, causing significant blasts at a storage site. The Russian Ministry of Defense attributes the incident to a fire that's triggered by ammunition. No casualties have been reported, but authorities have declared a state of emergency. Meanwhile, talks between the US, Ukraine and European officials to discuss ending Russia's war in Ukraine faltered as US Secretary of State Marco Rubio abruptly cancelled his trip to London and the negotiations were downgraded. Rubio's no-show prompted a broader meeting of foreign ministers from Ukraine, Britain, France and Germany to be cancelled, although talks continued at a lower level. Moreover, a Ukrainian delegation is set to meet US envoy Keith Kellogg in London after the meeting was postponed. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said that it is up to Ukraine to decide its future, after Vice President JD Vance said the US would walk away from talks if a peace deal with Russia was not agreed. France's presidency also stated that European countries think any peace deal to end the Ukraine war with Russia has to include the pro-EU nation's territorial integrity, after US Vice President JD Vance suggested that both sides would have to give up some of the territory they currently own. Now we move on to a discussion on this. We are joined by Keith Vaz, former British minister located in Goa, India. Thank you very much, Keith, for joining us. These talks were supposed to be significant in London, Keith, but the US's top diplomat, Marco Rubio, along with Steve Witkoff, Donald Trump's special envoy, didn't show up. What's the significance behind this, Keith?
Good evening, Thomas, from Mumbai. In fact, I moved from Goa. It is a bit of a mess. We started with very clear statements by President Trump that he was going to end the war in Ukraine. We now have different sets of talks going on all over Europe. We have President Zelensky calling for an immediate ceasefire. We have President Putin ensuring that the war continues with the drone attacks that you've just discussed. We have the possibility of a meeting in Moscow between the special envoy and President Putin. And we have the talks in London that are going on, which include France, Britain, and Germany. So at this moment, there are various different players at the highest levels. I mean, these are big countries having a say in what's going on, but all meeting in different circumstances with different terms and conditions. And then on top of this, you have Vice President Vance on his visit to India saying that if this is not resolved, America was just going to walk away. So it is a complete mess, from clear statements being made originally to various different activities going on, and someone has got to bring all this together. Basically, the most important way forward, I think now, is for all the parties to get together to discuss this. And that means Russia and Ukraine and the United States and the big four in Europe. Otherwise, you're just going to get a continuation of different messages, different series of talks, and it's not going to be very good in terms of progress being made for peace.
Keith, obviously territory is at the centre of all this. Russia has demands. It says that certain parts of Russian-speaking Ukraine are part of Russia, and say that the population there even wants to become a part of Russia. Ukraine has obviously denied this. How severe of a problem can you see the idea of territorial integrity playing a part in these peace negotiations. And let's say that Russia and Ukraine did sit at the table together, which they haven't yet. Surely the idea of territory, the issue of territory, will be proven as a huge obstacle here.
You're absolutely right, Thomas, and that's why they're not beginning the talks by talking about territory, because that will be the deal breaker. President Zelensky's made it very clear he is not going to cede a single iota of territory that belongs to Ukraine, and President Putin cannot go back to the Russian people and saying he's withdrawing from Crimea, which they've occupied for many years, and from the recently captured territory in Ukraine, and say, I'm giving that up. That is the big deal breaker. And if you like, you probably should have started with that discussion before you got on to anything else like mineral agreements and the like. That is going to be the biggest obstacle to peace. So someone's going to have to give in unless you have a permanent presence of peacekeepers who are in the area. It's going to be very difficult to know where that is going to end and where the lines are going to be drawn. It seems to be that the Americans realize that it's a deal breaker for President Putin. That's why they keep saying it's probable that some of the territory should be ceded. But no president can allow a situation to occur where parts of Ukraine are given to a different power.
Yes.
That's why you're going to have a referendum, I think, to decide that, and that can only be decided by the Ukrainian people.
Keith, obviously we touched on Vance's statements briefly about the US, the possibility of the US withdrawing from mediation efforts. But the US has also proposed recognizing Russia's annexation of Crimea and freezing current front lines as part of a settlement. How do you think this aligns with international law and the principles of territorial integrity?
It doesn't. It's completely against international law, and it's against the principles of the integrity of sovereign nations. And Europe will not stand for it. That's why you've got a different position from countries like Poland and from the United Kingdom and Russia and France and Germany. They are never going to accept this. Otherwise, it would mean that Russia would be able to go into other countries and everyone else will have a free-for-all. You have, of course, a situation that develops in some of the stans where other countries are claiming bits of countries in the Russian backyard. There is no end to that. You have to accept the territorial integrity of the nation state, and you cannot just simply go in there and invade and keep. So that's going to have a big problem for the people who are charged with trying to get peace. I suppose that's why we've got so many players. We've got Steve Witkoff, we've got Keith Kellogg, we've got Marco Rubio, we've got J.D. Vance now. Foreign policy, of course, not the purview of the vice president. And we've got the president, all saying, different things. The nuances are different, but it seems to be that the line is quite solid, but there are different bits at each end of that line. So I think it's going to be very tough for America to do what it promised to do. I think he said, didn't he, President Trump, that the Ukraine war would end on day one of his presidency?
Yes.
Well, we're now in April, so it's a very long day.
Yes. Keith Vaz, thank you very much for joining us. Always a pleasure. We now move over to the Middle East, where Iranian Foreign Minister